Thanks, Carmen. Thanks, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along. It's really good to see you all. This is my webinar about our experience of installing a heat pump in a Victorian terrace house in the south side of Glasgow. We're calling it Heat Pump versus Glasgow Winter because of the timing of the work and our possibly questionable decision to do all of this work in November and December of last year. It did actually give us a really good instant knowledge that the heat pump definitely worked in our house. That's a bit of a spoiler there. But let me talk you through our experience. I'll be covering our starting point, what were our goals and motivations, quick look through the timeline of everything that we did. I've got a whole load of before and after photos, which I'll try not to dwell on too much, but people have been enjoying seeing them when I've shown them before, so I promise it won't get a bit too much like what we did on our holidays. I've got some tips for surviving retrofit. I'm going to talk about money, how much we spent on it, and I'm going to tell you what it's like now after we've done it all. And then at the very end, I will answer any questions that you've got. Do feel free to put questions in the chat as I go along, but I can't see the chat anymore. I won't be responding to them. Or you might get Chris, maybe from Loco Home, answering any technical questions that I'm not able to answer. But yes, questions at the end. So our starting point for our retrofit adventure was our mid-terraced solid sandstone walled house built in 1902. It's in a whole neighbourhood of about 9 or 10 streets of small Victorian terraced and semi-detached houses. Ours is 114 square metres over 2 floors, plus basement and loft. Most of the original fireplaces have already been removed, but we do have one remaining fireplace, which until this work was done was a living flame gas fire, but we barely used it in the last few years. The roof is in good condition. That was redone in 2013. Double glazing had already been installed by a previous owner in 2009 and is still in good nick. We have dry underfloor heating in the bathroom, so it's not pumping water around, it's just electrically heated. And we learned through Loco Home that thankfully our pipework is suitable for heat pump flow rates. Otherwise, that would have been a big extra element of work to figure out, but we didn't have to do that. And the other side of the household is us, the people living in it. It's myself and Ian, who is also on this call. Camera off, I think, but he may come in and give us a wave or chip in at any point. I describe us as a middle-aged couple with no children. Ian disagrees with the middle-aged part, but we'll save that argument for another day. We are financially comfortable and we are geeks. This is the emoji of a hamster because there isn't an emoji for a guinea pig. So wherever you see the hamster emoji, that's where we are being guinea pigs for something in this process that I'll go over as we go along. So our goal for our retrofit was to get off gas, as simple as that. But ideally, we wanted to do that without massive disruption to the household and with minimum anxiety. Anxiety might come up a few times in this. It's something that has affected me quite a lot in the past, particularly in terms of getting things done in the home, in getting people in to do things in the home. We had a very, very bad experience with a roofer many years ago. And yeah, it's something that really stresses me out, just knowing that you need to bring someone in to break something to then make it better. And it's a problematic area for me. So yes, minimum anxiety, minimum disruption, as well as getting off gas. A sort of nice to have would be to make the back bedroom of the house warmer. That's the room I'm sitting in here. This is my home office, which since COVID I work from almost all the time. And it was always a bit cold. It's definitely the coldest room in the house. It's north facing. So yeah, nice to have would be to make this room warmer. And also nice to have would be to keep our electricity bills or our power bills similar to what they were before. We knew that there's a chance they could go up a little bit, but we hoped it wouldn't be by too much. So thinking about our motivations for all of this as well, there's the concept of pull factors and push factors. So the things that are kind of pulling you towards doing something, in this case, retrofit, were things like climate anxiety, another aspect of anxiety here, our general geeky interest in net zero technology. We already had investments in Ripple, which is a community-owned wind farm and also a solar park, where once they're switched on, we'll get our energy from those at cost price. and it's also supporting the building of that type of thing. Another pull factor was wanting to prove what's possible in a house like ours and to enable learning, because this is still quite a young area, this retrofitting of older homes. There's not enough suppliers around, there's not enough knowledge, there's not enough different ways that you can put together different pieces of technology. So we wanted to be guinea pigs and enable other people to learn from our experience. And also talking about it in this way is another way of doing that. So all those pull factors can add up over time. We also spent quite a lot of time watching YouTube videos about, Heat Geek and Fully Charged, the one all about electrify everything. And you can watch YouTube videos forever, but unless a push factor comes along that actually forces you to make the decision to start, you can just, you never actually get going on your motivation. So the push factor for us was that our gas boiler in November 2022 was declared at risk. It was about 7 years old, so it was not hugely old, but a little bit old. And we got it our annual boiler service. The gas engineer said it will probably last the winter, but it probably won't last the year. And it's at risk. It was badly corroded inside to the point where it couldn't be fixed. So obviously, climate anxiety and wanting to do the right thing, we definitely didn't want to replace it with another gas boiler. So we thought we need to start on this journey to getting rid of it, getting off gas. So not really knowing where to start, we did the first thing that we did know we could do, which is upgrade our loft insulation, because it was only about that thick. It needed to be that thick. So we did that. I'm going to go through this timeline quite quickly. There are lots of pictures and more information coming later in the talk. This is just to give you the structure of what we did. In February last year, we visited the house of a friend, a person called Nina, who had done a very renovation and retrofit of a similar Victorian house nearby on the south side of Glasgow. And she told us about Loco Home Retrofit Cooperative. So we visited her house to look at her heat pump, her underfloor heating, which is something we thought we might need, and so on. And yeah, she told us about Loco Home. So we joined and started going along to meetings and started using the forum and learning from other people that had been through this kind of thing. Nina also told us about Woodfellas, who had built some new storm doors for her house, which we absolutely loved. So a couple of months later, we were speaking to them for a little while, and we confirmed that we did want to order new storm doors and back door, which is going to make a huge difference to the draftiness of our house and improve that side of things. So that was ordered. Later that month, we got our retrofit assessment done by Loco Home. That's something that will come up later. Huge recommendation though, independent advice, absolutely fantastic. Not biased because I'm a member, honestly. So once we got the assessment, we started looking for quotes for heat pump and the types of insulation that we've been recommended to get. Later that month, I got made redundant, which was an absolute bugger at the time, but it ended up being, a kind of silver lining was I had more time to spend on the work for this project. So it kind of sped things up. I think it probably would have taken a bit longer overall if that hadn't happened. September, we visited Paul's house. Paul is here on the call. He's another member of Loco Home Cooperative, and he does house visits, like officially organised ones, which is something that we're going to be doing quite soon as well. So watch this space. That was another really helpful experience to see what was possible in a similar but larger house. And to also get his view on renewable heat, which is one of the installers that we were getting quotes for, because that's the installer he used. By 2nd of October, we had secured our quotes from the 2 installers that we wanted to go for. So we applied for Home Energy Scotland funding, which took exactly a month to get confirmed. And then basically, as soon as it's confirmed, you can press the button and go. So later that month, we installed our air source heat pump, our hot water tank, bigger radiators, and an open source monitoring kit. Oh, look, there's a guinea pig. This was a thing which Renewable Heat offered to include in our package to make it easy to figure out the performance of the boiler, the heat pump, sorry. Because it was a new combination of kit that they were installing that they hadn't tried before. So we were up for letting them do that to install a Samsung heat pump with a homely control system, which is not a combination they tried before. So then to put in the open source monitoring as well to see if they could get it working great. That'll come up later. I've just realized I skipped over a guinea pig up at the start when we were looking for quotes. So just rewind a little bit. The guinea pig there was because Loco Home actually linked us up with an installer, a heat pump installer, Renewable Heat, and an insulation installer, Insulation Installer Scotland, as part of a new kind of thing they were trialing of actually linking customers with suppliers. So we were involved in that. That's something Chris could maybe mention more about later if they're still doing that kind of thing. Okay, back to November 2023. So we had all our air source heat pump installed. And the next thing that happened was we decommissioned our gas meter, so we were off gas. That's exactly 1 year after our gas boiler was declared at risk. We got rid of it. We still have that ugly box outside the front of the house, but there's no gas meter in it anymore. We're not using it at all. Electricity only. December 2023, we installed the rest of the insulation that we needed. This was room and roof insulation. I'll explain that when I'm showing you the pictures. Underfloor insulation on the ground floor and loft style insulation in the void above the bathroom. All of this was done by Insulation Installers Scotland. Finally, in February, we installed a chimney cowl on the last of our chimneys that had not yet been capped. All the rest already were, and now the last one is. So there's just a couple things still to do to finalise our retrofit, and that is paint the dormers, which we still haven't done. You may be able to see behind me a kind of dark triangle. That's an unpainted dormer. We still need to install an induction hob. We've got a portable one that we were just using to see if we actually like the idea, and we do. So we're going to definitely install one. We just haven't found one yet. We still want to invest in more projects with Ripple Energy, so the community-owned wind farm, solar park, and so on, to cover our increased electricity use. But that needs to stabilise first so that we know the sort of predicted energy use for the year before we can invest in more to cover that. And we still need to consider one of the things that Loco Home recommended, which was mechanical ventilation with heat recovery for our bathroom. That would just be taking out the wet air and replacing it with drier air, but not losing the heat along the way. That's something we've not looked into yet, but is certainly considering for the future. So that's our timeline. And now we're going to come on to the pictures. My very first picture is very wonky because I realized last minute we didn't actually have any pictures of this. So I literally just climbed up the ladder half an hour ago and took a snap and chucked it in here. So our loft was already insulated, but only to a depth of 120 mil, which is nowhere near the 270 that's recommended. So a company called Underfloor Insulation Glasgow added an extra 150 mil of wool on top of that existing insulation, but they also installed loft legs to take, well, they took out the flooring of the loft, put in the more insulation, put in loft legs to raise up the flooring, and then put flooring back in again, so we could still use it for storage, but there's now lots more insulation that's not getting squished underneath. Not much more to say about that. It was just adding to what was already there. The company that did it, they were very good, very helpful, very reliable, but they were not, if we had known about Home Energy Scotland at that point, we could not have claimed it based on them because they're not Trustmark approved installers. That's something that matters when you're looking for installers if you do want to get funding. But at that time, we didn't know about the funding yet, so we just paid for it. Our storm doors and our back door made by Woodfellas, this fabulous company. You can see the before and after for each. We went for solid wood with large double glazed windows. The difference that they've made, especially in the porch is now like a greenhouse. It's absolutely fabulous. And yeah, the drafts in the back door, and there's no more slugs crawling under the door. That's something that we found a lot with our back door. It's now properly weather sealed. The light has been absolutely fabulous, both at front and back. Just having this extra light coming in, it's just fabulous. And the solar gain as well, because our front door is south facing, so we get sunlight directly into our house now through the front door, where before it was blocked. So yes, that was a lovely change. The heat pump itself, that slotted into the space between our back door and our basement door in the back garden, slotted in very neatly. We just had to remove a raised bed. We thought that was going to be quite complicated, but it turned out that the raised bed had just been built directly on top of the patio slabs, so we didn't have to dig anything out. We were expecting to, well, I say we, Renewable Heat, the installers, were expecting to have to dig down and make a concrete pad for the heat pump to go on, but it turned out they could just pop it straight down on the slabs. And you can see it's just a nice kind of dark grey. It blends in with everything else out there. It's not that massive. And it is a Samsung EHS Mono HT Quiet 8 kilowatt R32. I don't know what the EHS Mono and HT means, but the quiet, that sounds good to me. And the 8 kilowatts that's the power that it can, or that's the amount of heat that it can produce. Based on Loco Home's peak heat loss calculations in their retrofit assessment, we needed 6.6 kilowatts output to heat our house appropriately. Is it -3 degrees? So yeah, if it was -3 outside, that's how much power we would need to heat our house to the desired level. So we could have got away with a 7 kilowatt heat pump, but this model didn't come in 7 kilowatts. So, and this is the model that Renewable Heat suggested installing so that it would work with Homely and for the other kinds of things we wanted. So we were happy with that. A heat pump doesn't stand alone in the way that a gas boiler does. You also need to have quite a lot of other kit behind the scenes. So this is literally on the other side of the basement wall from where the heat pump is. We used to have the gas boiler in that spot, but now we have a 200-litre water tank. We have expansion vessels for the central heating circuit and for the hot water circuit. We've got all those pipes and pumps and sensors and switches that you can see there. And then on the right, there's all the brains and the flashy lights and the stuff that makes it look a bit like a starship when the lights are off. So yeah, that's our plant room. We were very fortunate to have this basement under our house with quite a lot of unused space down there. So it did end up sprawling across the wall just because there was space, the sort of luxury of space. But just to reassure anyone that's thinking, we don't have that kind of space, you don't have to have it sprawling out like that. It can be put together very, very neatly. The picture on the left here is Paul's plant room. So Paul, who's the other member who does home visits and who's on this call. All of their kit, including a slimline water tank, whereas ours is quite fat, you can also get sort of taller, thin ones. Everything that is needed fits into the size of a double wardrobe in their house. And I also found just random ones online of things tucked in the understair cupboard. And again, sort of in the old airing cupboard's been converted into the plant room for a heat pump and so on. So plant rooms can be a lot more compact than ours, just to reassure anyone. Most of our radiators got swapped out for bigger ones, bigger as in sort of deeper rather than different shape. So in our front room, we went from this 2-panel to a 3-panel radiator. That's the biggest one in the house now. It slots in very nicely in the same spot. The upstairs radiators, most of those got changed for slightly different sized ones. Slightly different sort of horizontal and vertical dimensions. So there were a couple of places where a new hole needed to be drilled in the floor, but it still was very, very simple. Just kind of lift out the old one, put in the new one, and a little bit of drilling and shifting. All done very quickly and very neatly. I think the bottom left image here, this is the back bedroom. So this is the new radiator over there under the window, is the biggest that could possibly fit into that space because this is the room that we wanted to make warmer if possible. So yeah, there's this gigantic radiator that's now sort of level with the windowsill and doing a great job. Downstairs in the dining room, there was already a similar radiator to the one in here in the window of the dining room, but it wasn't possible to switch in a much bigger one there. So we added a second radiator instead. So we've now got this nice tall one behind the door. And the position of that means that it's also heating the hallway and that heat sort of spreads around the rest of the house, which is good. Okay, on to the room and roof insulation. This is what it's called when you have a dormer ceiling, so the sort of sloping diagonal ceiling that is the roof eating into your room. They take off the diagonal part put in insulation behind, and then rebuild the ceiling around it. So this was done in 3 rooms upstairs. My room, this back bedroom, is the one that I've got the photos of. We also have the smaller bedroom on the front of the house with a similar shaped dormer and window in there. And then the master bedroom has just 2 sort of small strips of dormer. I don't have photos of those, but I'm happy to show you them later if anybody wants to see that. So before, this is what it looked like. Step 1 was to strip it all back to the wood. Saying it like that and just showing the single photo of it makes it sound like a really easy thing, but it was awful. It was hellish. The guy there, you can see, is wearing a ventilator. All the windows had to be opened. The dust was everywhere. It was incredible. Yeah, quite an experience. I'll mention a bit more about that later. So after it's been stripped back to the wood, they added in 100 mil of PIR insulation, which is sort of the blocky, lightweight stuff that you can cut with a plastic knife. So that was packed in between all the rafters, leaving a 5mm gap on the ceiling, on the roof side for ventilation. Packed in and taped up to vapor seal it. Then over the top of that was this Superfoil SF19 Plus stuff, which is a bit like, it felt a bit like a sleeping bag. It's not just foil, it's got kind of layers of soft insulating foam in between, sort of layers of foil. So yeah, quite like a sort of sleeping bag stapled onto the ceiling. So that's an extra layer of heat. And then on top of the foil, they've added plasterboard to plaster it back up again, and then a plaster skim over the top of that. And basically that is what it still looks like. We still haven't done any of the finalizing or decorating of that because we just haven't. Okay. Yes. Don't think there's anything else to say about that apart from we were just really impressed how neatly it was done and how quickly it was done, especially with the complexity of the shapes around the window. It's, yeah, done a great job. The same company, yeah, it took 4 days to do all of that insulation, the room and roof stuff that I've already showed you. Then on the 5th day, they did the underfloor insulation, which is the before shot is that's the old gas boiler. So that's the ceiling above the gas boiler, the ceiling of the basement. First step was to install 150 mil of NAF Omnifit insulation, this kind of woolly looking stuff that's packed in there, similar to loft insulation. And then step 2 was to cover it all with a breathable membrane. That both holds it all in place nice and securely and neatens it, stops little straggly bits hanging down. And it's also a kind of, it's breathable, so it's not like a vapor seal, but it does stop the wind kind of sucking the heat out. Not that it's windy in our basement or anything, but yeah, you know what I mean. And the final bit of insulation was loft style insulation in the void above the bathroom. I don't have a before shot for this. This work was done so incredibly quickly. We were out for about half that day, and they completely did it in the time that we were out of the house. So in quite a lot of the houses in Waverley Park, this area that we live in, the bathroom is kind of halfway up the stairs and then back and out under the slope of the roof. In our house, the bathroom has a ceiling, so the kind of triangular void above that space is just this empty void with a skylight in it for our house. So what they did was they took off this window, climbed into the space behind, crawled through these little bits between the beams, and laid in 300 millimeters of NAF earth wool. Again, the kind of loft insulation type stuff. And that's laid directly onto the ceiling of the bathroom. But there's also, unfortunately, I didn't get a photo. There's also these kind of hatches, I can't remember what they're called, that go over the top of the halogen lights that are in the ceiling. Well, LED lights now, but yeah, they need this kind of the protection over the top, both to stop heat escaping and to just protect the electricals there. So yeah, there's also these little domes over each of the lights. Coming to the end of the photo segment here, but just a few more about the gadgets and the buttons that we now have to press. So previously we controlled the boiler using a Hive app and the thermostat. So we could set things in the app, or we could set things by turning knobs and pressing buttons on the thermostat. Now we have the Homely app, which is just the app. There's no buttons to press anywhere. It's all just controlled in the app. And Homely is quite a new and young thing. The app is very, very minimal, but you can set a schedule for when you want different temperatures, and you can set a schedule for when the hot water should be hot. And that's pretty much it. As well as the sensors, the controls, you've got sensors and brains behind the scenes controlling things as well. So before it was just the Hive thermostat that measured the temperature in the hall where we had it stuck, or in a room if we took it in there. And that's what controlled whether the boiler would be on or off. So now with Homely, it's a bit more complicated. Homely has what we tell it through the app. This little white box is its own thermostat on the wall, but there's no buttons. It's just a temperature sensor. And then it also brings in the current and the forecasted weather for our location. And it calculates all of this to say when the heat pump should be on and what temperature it should be running at, or what temperature it should be aiming for. So this is one of the boxes in the basement that takes all of this information and passes it on to this other box in the basement, which is the Samsung control panel, which we don't touch. We don't do anything with that. Homely controls it. And something I'll come on to is we do have some slight problems between not really knowing what Homely is telling Samsung and how Samsung is interpreting that. I'll come on to that later. It's not a massive problem. It's still running very, very well and very efficiently. It just could be that tiny bit better once we figure out, or once Renewable Heat figure out what the boxes are telling each other. Finally, as well as controls and sensors and brains, monitoring comes into it. This is our geekiness. Before, and still using, in fact, we have 3 sets of homemade sensors, which Ian bought the parts for and installed himself, and set up with a dashboard that I'll show you in a minute, that monitor the temperature and humidity in 3 different rooms of the house. And I can't remember how long, them quite a few months. We wanted to have a really good idea of how it used to be compared to how it is now. And it's just been really interesting to see the differences between the rooms. There's one in this room, which has always been the coldest room in the house. There's one in his office, the small front bedroom, which has always been the hottest room in the house. And there's one in the living room downstairs. So now, as well as those sensors which are still running, we also have the Open Energy Monitoring EMON HP bundle, which Renewable Heat had suggested, which involves another thermostat separate from the Homely one. It involves having temperature sensors on a lot of the pipes in the basement around the heat pump. So the temperature of the water that's flowing out of the heat pump, the temperature of the water that's coming back from the radiators, and possibly a couple of other things, I'm not sure. The third thing down here is the new fuse box that was put in the basement, which monitors the consumption of the heat pump, how much energy the heat pump is using, and also the controls and the water cylinder separately from the heat pump. So it's measuring all of these different things and piling it all together into an online set of charts, which I will show you shortly, which all kind of is controlled through another of the little boxes on the wall in the basement, and a bunch of cables and USBs and flashy lights and things. But yes, that's the monitoring. And at this point, I'm going to switch over to a quick demo. So the monitoring, this is the output of Ian's little Raspberry Pi sensors. So this is live data. So right now, oh, okay, maybe not live. That looks like it's got a flat line on it. Right now in the living room, it is, oh, it doesn't tell you there. Right now in the living room, it is 51.8 humidity and 18.8 degrees centigrade. And right now in the office where Ian is currently watching this from, hi babe, it is 45.4 humidity and 24.2 centigrade. You can see how much hotter it is in there. Yeah, hot stuff. It's a toasty little room. And oh yeah, spare room is 19.4. That feels about right to me. So this has been really useful to just sort of look at on a moment by moment. This is what it is right now. And then this up to the charts tells you what it's been doing over the last week. And then I think you can download the data and crunch it over longer time periods, but I haven't been involved in that. I don't know if Ian's done much of that, but that's what we can do with that. And now I will switch over to, this is the Open Energy Monitoring EMON HP output. It loads up always on this, sort of showing you the last month. Each day you can hover over it and see. So on, for example, Saturday, 2nd of March, we used a total of 22.7 kilowatt hours of electricity, and using that, the heat pump gave us 67 kilowatt hours of heat. All of this was while it was 5.1 degrees on average outside for that day, and giving us a coefficient of performance for that day of 3, which means that for every 1 kilowatt of electricity that went into the system, we got 3 kilowatts of heat out of the system. So that's how we know that the heat pump is running efficiently compared to a gas boiler, for example, where you get less than 1 for each kilowatt of gas that goes in, you get less than 1 kilowatt of energy that comes out. So that's why heat pumps are more efficient. So you get more heat than the energy you put in. I think I could explain how and why that is, but I'm not going to try. I'm going to leave it to Chris or someone else to maybe do that later. But it's really interesting that, you know, even when the air is below freezing in temperature, there's still heat energy you can pull out of it and compress and put into the water and send around the house. It's magic. Science is magic. So this is the wider data, but let's click into that same day, Saturday, the 2nd of March, and look at the day itself. Zoom in a little bit. So the data that we are peering at several times a week, sometimes several times a day at the moment. Purple line at the bottom is the outdoor temperature. That updates every 10 minutes, I think it is. The black line in the middle is the temperature that is being read on the EMON HP thermostat, which is in the other side of the hall from the homely one, so it reads higher. Not quite sure why, but it reads higher. So the temperature is probably more like 19.7 than 20.7 at that point. But it's still helpful to see how constant the heat pump is keeping the temperature, just from how flat that line is. Then the blue area at the bottom is electricity being used by the heat pump, and the yellow is heat being produced. Those are both on the scale of kilowatts, so you can see, again, that's a good illustration of how efficient the heat pump runs, that there's a lot more heat coming out than there is energy going in. And then the top 2 lines are, this is a flow temperature. So the water that's coming out of the heat pump into the heating system was at this moment running at 13.94 or 39.4 degrees, and the water coming back from the radiators was 36.8. So that suggests that, you know, 3 degrees of heat was being lost from that water, but 1 into the house for us. What else can I show you in this? We can go way, way back in time to when the heat pump was first switched on in November. We've got data going all the way back to then. It's not complete data because there was a problem with the reading of the energy being used. The consumption number wasn't there, so you see the blue area at the bottom is missing. But it's still interesting to see the different shapes of, different days and the outdoor temperature. When the purple line is down, the red and yellow lines will usually be up because you need hotter water to heat the house when the outdoor temperature is lower. So all this kind of thing is really interesting to see. I'm starting to run out of ideas of what to show you on this, but if there's anything that you would like me to show you later on in the questions section, any sort of questions you'd like to ask of the data, I can try and show you the sorts of things we can learn from it. But it is just fascinating to have a rummage through and understand what's going on. Okay, back to my slides. Where did my slides go? There we go. Right, tips for surviving retrofit. The choice of the word surviving is very much my personal thing. It's the anxiety thing that I mentioned before. It was about feeling that we'd made the right decisions. It was about coping with people being in the house and the mess and the disruption and so on. People who look at it differently would not use the word surviving. It might be enjoying retrofit, being excited about retrofit. So the surviving aspect is just me. I appreciate that everyone can have a different experience in this, but my tips nonetheless. The first one is to get clear on your priorities. I find this really helps with decision making and with where to look for advice. So we confirmed that a high priority for us was to minimize disruption and anxiety during the process and to enable learning to help wider adoption of this type of technology and this type of actions in old houses by being guinea pigs and sharing our experience. And just as important as what is a priority is what is not a priority. So it was not a priority for us to reduce our energy bills, although we would have thought, this would be nice, obviously. It was not a priority for us to protect period features in the house. I didn't mention that when I was showing you the room and roof pictures, that there used to be a cornice going all the way around the top of the ceiling in here. The cornice has now been covered up by the new slope of the ceiling after the insulation has come in. They could have not done that. They could have protected and kept the cornicing by putting in less insulation. And we said, no, put in the insulation. We want that. That's more important to us than the cornice. It was also not a priority for us to use any particular types of materials or manufacturers. If we'd had the brain space to look into a lot more about embodied carbon and different types of renewable insulation types and that sort of thing, it's possible to put a lot more thought and a lot more decision making into that. But that was beyond our brain capacity. So it was not a priority for us. We went with, obviously we talked with the suppliers about what the choices were, and generally we went with their recommendations. Next tip is to get independent advice. For example, by going to Loco Home and getting them to do a retrofit assessment on your house. The cut-off bit of text on the right there is one of the pages from the report that they produced from us in June last year. With really, this was a summary page. There were pages and pages, slides and slides and slides of advice and tips. It was just the most useful and informative thing. So what some of the things we learned from it were that we didn't need underfloor heating, that bigger radiators would be enough to heat our house with a heat pump. That was something that we were really unsure about. We'd been told so many different things from so many different people. We'd had people saying, oh, no, you'll never be able to heat your house like this with radiators. You definitely need underfloor heating. And just the thought of having to move all the furniture and take up the floor and do all of that kind of stuff, it was really, ugh. So yeah, it was a great relief to know that bigger radiators would be enough. And I can categorically say bigger radiators have been enough. We're very cozy. We learned that after the planned improvement measures, our home's heat demand would be the 6.6 kilowatt that I mentioned earlier. So we ended up with it could have been a 7 kilowatt heat pump, but we ended up with an 8. The Loco Home assessment went into a lot of detail about what insulation would have the most impact and how it should be installed and things to look out for and make sure that ventilation is not compromised by the insulation and so on and so on. They also covered quick wins versus longer term considerations, and they gave us an action plan, which was just incredibly helpful of what we can do now, what we should plan to do next, and so on. And also an incredibly helpful thing was what to ask potential installers and what to look out for with them. To have that, the kind of hand-holding of having this in the report, and also just being able to talk to Chris and get more advice on that when we were seeing him at members meetings and so on, and just random emails from time to time. It's incredibly helpful to get advice from someone who is not trying to sell you anything. Yeah, I don't think I need to say any more than that. I hope that's a good advert for you, Carmen and Chris. But yeah, I absolutely 100% recommend it. Oops. Next tip is to think about timing. So in our case, the installation of the heat pump involved having 3 days with no heating and no hot water. The room and roof work meant 3 days with the ceilings down and the windows open for ventilation because there's dust everywhere, and also meant a very, very big cleanup job. So in hindsight, we maybe wouldn't have done these things in November and December. It resulted in us having to move out twice. So we had 6 nights in hotels as it was just too physically cold to stay at home. We also, because it was that time of year, all of the teams were impacted one way or another by people getting colds, people getting flus. So, for example, the plasterers that came on the last day of the room and roof work, it was supposed to be 2 people coming for a 7-hour day. One of them was sick. So we had one person who worked for 10 hours with no breaks, did an amazing job, but by the end of it was falling over. And yeah, there's some few little bits where we're going to need to do some, polyfiller and so on, but he did the best he could. And the big cleanup job had to happen over our Christmas break. So we spent quite a lot of our holidays cleaning and reassembling rooms, which is all right in the end. But yeah, maybe it would have been better to do this at a different time of year. Certainly, if you've got a more complicated household, children and pets and so on, having to move out is going to be a massive deal. It was not too bad for just the 2 of us. Also, think about what order to do things in. The recommendation from Loco Home was to do the insulation first and then do the heat pump. We did that the other way around. There was a reason for this, which I can go into, but we did it the wrong way around. So the tip is to do the messy stuff like room and roof insulation before you get shiny new radiators. So my lovely big radiator over there got full of dust and rubble. It's got a dent in the top of it. The TRV valve is like really gritty and might need to be replaced because it just there's no way to stop the dust getting in everywhere with that type of work. So yes, think about the order that you do things in. Allow lots of time to find installers. It is very tricky. We could only get one installer to quote for room and roof insulation, just nobody wants to do it. Also, not every heat pump installer will design and size a system based on insulation work that hasn't happened yet. So, we can say, oh, we're planning to do this, this, and this. And they won't take that. They'll just say, no, we have to design it based on what you actually have now. So we were happy that Renewable Heat were willing to do that, to assume that we really would do the insulation work we'd planned and design the system based on that. So places to look for installers, the Loco Home Forum, the Energy Saving Trust database, although I found that the data in there was often quite out of date. So people were listed as offering room and roof insulation, and then you contact them and they say, oh no, we stopped doing that. Or yes, we'll do that, but only if you're on an Eco4, if you're someone that's on benefits and we can just claim the money directly from the government, that kind of thing. Other places to look, Google and Trustpilot, really good reviews, and ask your neighbours. I feel like time is getting a little bit tight, so I might skip a wee bit here. Be prepared for mess. Sealing work is lots of dust, so you can get these things to seal off the rooms that aren't being worked on. Highly recommended. And build into your budget some professional cleaning. It just saves you so much time. So the day after the plasterer, we had a professional cleaner come in. Again, that was meant to be 2 people, ended up being 1 because the other one was sick. But they still did a fabulous job just getting out the next very thick layer of dust, getting that removed. Hire a rug doctor, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of ways you can help with the cleanup. Ah, yes, finding joy in the chaos is a good tip for surviving. I really enjoyed every time a radiator was taken off the wall, looking at what crazy wallpaper choice a previous owner of the house had made and had left behind. In one room, some of the wallpaper got damaged when the ceiling came down, and we found 3 different colors and layers of stuff behind that. Just imagining what the room was like when it had dark blue striped wallpaper is just a bit mind blowing. This pink striped sock, I've never owned a sock like that. I'm fairly sure Ian hasn't. And we've lived in this house for 12.5 years. And that sock must have been stuck behind the radiator for longer than that because it's not ours. It didn't belong to anyone that's ever stayed here and done laundry. So I don't know why that tickled me so much, but yeah, this little sock that's been tucked behind a radiator for so long and is now free. Okay, money. Everything that I've told you about came to a total cost of 34,000, but because we got 12,000 grant from Home Energy Scotland, the total cost for us was £22,058. We also got a loan, but I'll come on to that in the next slide. This breakdown is here because we wanted to highlight that, yes, 22,000 is a lot, but 30% of that was our lovely, lovely doors, which we spent probably a lot more money than we needed to on, but we love them so much and they do a really, really fantastic job. So just wanted to highlight that there. So 40% of that 22,000 is the heat pump, 30% was the doors, insulation was about a quarter, whoops, and other was all the other little bits and bobs, different insulation and hotel and so on. So the upfront cost to us after the HES grant and loan that we got was £13,000. So we could, as well as the grant, we could get a loan for part of the heat pump work and part of the room and roof and underfloor insulation work. So as well as the £13,000, we got this £9,000 interest-free loan, which we're paying off at a rate of £75 a month for 10 years. But we did have to cover the full amount of 34,000, although spread out over time. We did have to cover the full amount of the heat pump and the room and roof insulation work until Home Energy Scotland actually paid out on the money that we were eligible for, which took a little while. It took 44 working days to get the deposit claim paid out. There were some errors on both sides there. They processed it as if it was a final claim, which meant they kept asking us for more evidence that we didn't actually need because it was a deposit claim. And then we missed some emails from them. So there was a big, long delay on that. But we did finally get the payout. And the final claim was smoother process. It was just 12 working days from application to payout. But until both of those were paid out, we did just have to, eat that cost and wait for it to come back. I'm going to skip ahead, but there is advice on the Loco Home Forum for dealing with Home Energy Scotland, and these slides will be available to you after the talk as well, so you can come back and look at that. So what it's like now in our house, our EPC ratings have improved. That's boring. Much more interesting is that we are off gas. You can see here the huge amount of gas that we used to use, especially during the winter. It's now just more electricity and no more gas. We're not quite at full efficiency yet, as I mentioned. So we can see from some of the data in EMON that I showed you, when there's these sharp spikes in the data, that's showing that the heat pump is cycling. It's turning on and turning off again. It's turning on and turning off again. That's not very good for the lifespan of the boiler or for efficiency. And we're not quite sure why, but Renewable Heat are actively working on it. We had the engineer out just yesterday trying a couple of different things with, what these boxes is saying to each other. So the expected coefficient of performance for our heat pump is 3.5, and we're averaging around 3. So it's very, very good, but it could just be that little bit better. So if we can figure out the cycling issue, I think that'll crack it. And our bills do seem to be going down, which is a very welcome surprise. The data here is the average cost per day for all of our energy, normalized using the prices from 2023, which is the most recent price that I've got for gas because we don't use gas anymore. So the historic prices include gas and electricity. Since December, it's only electricity. You can see that the previous 3 Decembers were cheaper than, 2 of the previous Januaries we were cheaper than, all the previous Februaries, and 1 of the previous Marches. Bills are going down, which is lovely. We shall continue to monitor that and see how it goes. But at the moment, we're paying £200 a month for energy, and that's every month we pay that, and then it evens out over the year. The house is quieter. There's a kind of muffling effect of the insulation and the better external doors. radiators are silent. They're no longer sort of ticking and pinging in the morning when they get cranked up really hot, because the temperature is just kept fairly constant all the time. So there's no sort of getting very cold and then getting very hot again. And the heat pump itself is really quiet. It's living up to its name. So from inside the house, the fridge and the pump in our fish tank are both louder than the heat pump. They drown it out. You can't hear it at all. So yeah, it's this very surprisingly quiet box out back. Finally, most importantly, what it's like is that we are really, really cozy. So this back bedroom, my office is much warmer. I used to sit here. I used to have these thermal tops and these the monkey and the neck hot water bottle on constant rotation when I was working from home. They're now just stuck at the bottom of a cupboard. I had to like pull them all out to take this photo. Just don't need them anymore. But as well as this room being much warmer, the whole house is more comfortable because it's constantly heated to this really nice temperature. And we're really enjoying this copious hot water on demand. I had gotten to the point with the climate anxiety of always just, doing the little bit of dishwashing that we did other than in the dishwasher. And whenever I wash my hands or anything like that, I would just use cold water because it just felt so wrong to burn gas just to wash my hands in a slightly warmer temperature. But now the water's there and it's been heated cleanly and we just use loads of it and it's lovely. And the clearest sign that heat pump versus Glasgow winter heat pump was one is that in December we had to turn some radiators down, and that was even before the insulation work had been done. So the heat pump was running in that week of snow, hence the snowman picture, which will come up again in a second. We hadn't yet done all the insulation, and we had to turn radiators down because we were too hot in the house. So heat pump 1, Glasgow winter 0, or is it nil? I think it's nil. Okay, that's me. Does anyone have any questions?
I might jump in here just to say it as well, because I think formally we were going to finish 8, but I think it's going to run on a little bit just for the questions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But yeah, if anyone needs to go at 8, that's fine. I'll just quickly do my conclusion and then we can move on to the questions if that's all right. So yeah, thanks everyone so much for coming, and thank you, Kat. That was amazing, very practical advice, very helpful, and really positive result for you and Ian. A little bit about Loco Home as well. So we're for those of you who don't know about us, we are a cooperative in Glasgow. We're here to make better retrofit more accessible. And we have a membership which is open to everyone, including tradespeople, homeowners, etc. So yes, if you want to get involved with Local Home, we've got a members meeting coming up in April. So yeah, it's a kind of community of retrofitters, and you can kind of join and get involved. I'm just going to put some links in the chat. So yeah, and also, yeah, we really appreciate if you can fill out a feedback form as well. It's such helpful. It's just so helpful for us for moving forward, for doing events that actually people want and find valuable. So if you tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, it's really helpful. So I put a link there. And also I'll send a follow-up email to everyone as well, and include some more links as well, including links to the slides and the recording, and also yeah, the feedback form again. So yes, I think that's my conclusion. And yeah, I'll pass over to, in fact, I think I'm going to read out the questions as well. So I'll get started on that. 2 seconds. So the first one is from Nick, asking, in fact, Nick, do you wanna ask it in person, or should I?
I can do it. It just says, please could you remind us the name of the insulation installer you used? Thanks.
Yes, that was Insulation Installers Scotland. That's their logo there, Insulation Installers Scotland. they did the room and roof and the underfloor.
Great. And then the next question is from Anthony Powell. What's been your lowest cop and the outdoor temperature at the time?
Ooh, we'd have to have a rummage through the data for that, but I'm sure we can figure it out. Ian, do you want to have a look for that in the meantime and see if we can come up with it? And I'll answer another question.
Okay, so we'll go back to that one. In adding in new radiators and new positions, did you have to take your floors up to add the new pipework, Peter?
Yes, they were only in 2 places. So in obviously where the new radiator was added in the dining room, they had to put new pipe in there. In the main bedroom, they had to peel back just a little bit of carpet and take up a short bit of floorboard because they had to drill a new hole and then link from that pipe up to the new place. But that was just, again, that was one little area. And then similarly in the small bedroom, they just peeled back the carpet from that corner just to do that tiny bit of work there. But that was all. And then the carpets just went back down again, totally fine. That was as much as we had to do for pipes.
Great. Peter's asking, could we see an EPC slide, please? The EPC slide.
Yes. Sorry, I skipped past that because I knew I was running out of time, but I shall find it. There you go. So our efficiency went up from 50 to 70, and our environmental friendliness went up from 41 to 69. It was Chris that did the EPC assessments. So any comments on that, Chris?
No, EPCs are what they are. There's lots of criticisms of EPCs, but they're the best system we've got available for compliance and for supporting the paying out of loans and grants and stuff. Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah.
Great. The next question from Harry Miller is a comment and a question. We've been logging temperatures and humidities in all the rooms in some of our group's homes. The logs revealed that to reduce their climate impact, some in our group are living at around 14, 15 degrees Celsius in their occupied rooms. They dress appropriately and have become acclimatized to life in much cooler temperatures. It'd be interesting to know why it's generally recommended that room thermostats are set to around 21 degrees Celsius if we can become used to lower temperatures, excluding illness or age-related need for heat. I don't know if that sounds like something that, I don't know,
Yeah.
I want to comment on as well, or Barry.
Can I come on, Kat? Is that all right? From a
go for it.
point of view, when you're designing a heat pump, in particular, if you're getting a heat pump that's going to be government funded either through the boiler upgrade scheme in England or the Home Energy Scotland grant in Scotland, it needs to be compliant with the MCS certification. And to get that MCS certification, it needs to be powerful enough. The system between the heat pump, the radiators, and the pipework need to be powerful enough to maintain living rooms at 21 degrees when it's at your design temperature outside, which is -4 in Glasgow and -2 in say Devon, and or 0 I think in Devon. So, but doesn't mean you have to operate it like that. And in reality, there's lots of internal gains, like people living there, cooking and washing and so on, that you don't need all the heat to come from the heat pump. But that's just the rules around how MCS works and how the funding works. You have to be able to operate the heating to maintain 21 degrees. You don't have to. And in reality, and 22 degrees in the bathroom, which is ridiculous. No one I know does that in practice. But you don't have to do that. It's just that if the next owners of the building need that comfort level for health reasons, then it can do it.
Yeah.
I think that's where the 21 degrees comes from. I think that's where your question is coming from, Harry, but please correct me if there's more to that question than that.
We certainly run the house cooler than that. Yeah, I mean, our thermostat is set to 20, but that's sitting in the hall. And this room being at sort of 19.5 is perfectly comfortable for me. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'll move on to the next question. If you want to, if you feel like your question hasn't been answered, just put it back in the chat and can come back to it. So from Rosie, with your setup, if your internet goes down for whatever reason, does the whole system stop working?
No, it carries on. If the internet was down, we would no longer be able to change the schedule. But once the schedule is dialed in, it carries on. It's only if there's a power cut that would be screwed, but you would in any case in that situation. So yeah.
Great. The next question, does Local Home Retrofit operate in Edinburgh? I could answer this, or Chris maybe. Do you want to answer?
I replied to that one in the chat just to say that maybe contact Edinburgh first. Sorry, Carmen.
Okay,
Covered
great.
that one. Yeah.
Great. Are you on a flexible energy tariff to take advantage of renewable generation, or is this something you would consider in the future? From Nikki.
We are not on a, we could have been, but because of the Ripple Energy investments, we didn't want to get locked into something, because once the wind farm gets switched on, that needs to be added into a bill with Octopus. And then once that's running, then we could maybe change to a different tariff and see how that works out. But yeah, in the meantime, we're just waiting for Ripple to come online before we change anything with Octopus.
Great. Andrew is asking, are Local Home available only in Scotland? Is there anything similar in England?
Again, I've put a response to that one in the chat just to say that if you send us an email to info@localhome.coop, then we can connect you with any organisation we know of that's equivalent to us in your area.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and if you the email that you got the webinar link on, if you just reply to that, it'll go to us as well. So oh yeah, sorry, I've seen that. Did you go to a specialist for your new home energy ratings? I've heard people have struggled to get reliable ratings for older buildings that have been retrofitted due to lack of understanding among high street surveyors. It's interesting. Well, that's from Rosie.
Yeah, well, we went back to Loco Home. They did both of them. I can't comment on going with anyone else, but
yeah, what I'd say about this is that to get an EPC that fully reflects the performance of the building and the heating system, it does take more time. It takes more time to properly identify all the components and how they're working and find the documentation, and it costs more than many people would realize to provide EPCs to maintain the accreditation. So look for someone who does it. Don't go to one of the online kind of brokers for EPCs, because they are just competing on price, and it's all they're trying to do is get you an EPC to put a tick in a box so that you can sell or rent your property. You will need to find a better EPC surveyor. And if you want to get the highest scores that really reflect the performance, the impact of really deep retrofits, like really deep air tightness measures, then that's extremely difficult to find, and you need to find someone who can do a full SAP assessment. So again, drop us a line at info@ if you want to know more about that.
cool. Thank you. I see Ian has come on camera. Have you found the lowest COP?
I have, yes. It looked like it was start of February when the temperature was -2 overnight and 3 during the day, and it came out at 2.69. That might not be the absolute lowest, but it was the lowest one I could quickly find.
Thank you. That's cool.
Next question is from Andrew. What was your heat loss calculation before making improvements?
Sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember. It'll be in the, I think it will be in the retrofit assessment somewhere.
I'll take
but
it.
I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, nice one.
Okay, we'll move on. Also from Andrew, you replaced your front storm door. Did you also replace your front door?
No. No, it still is. I don't think it's the original front door, because it's got that kind of 70s style ripply glass in it. But no, we haven't replaced the front door. we don't feel like we need to anymore because the storm doors are now such a good seal. So we might just replace it for aesthetic reasons.
Then Libby, what's the alternative to a basement? You said a wardrobe.
Oh, it's whatever space you've got that is big enough and convenient enough for you, and that not too far away from the heat pump. I think maybe that's something Barry could mention if he's here. That is it the case that all the plant room stuff has to be as close as possible to the actual heat pump?
I think Barry's left at 8, so maybe
Ah,
over to
sorry.
Yeah, I think I've heard installers say they can fit it into spaces small as less than a meter by a meter, so 800 mil by 800 millimeters. So it could be an old airing cupboard, for example, if you still have one.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the photos was of that.
My heat pump
like
is all my clobber is under the stairs.
Another one from Andrew. Have you looked into discounted heat pump electricity prices? I think that connects a little bit to the questions earlier.
No, I didn't know that was a thing. I shall now look into it.
Yeah, so that'd be like the smart tariffs, like you were talking about earlier on, Kat. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
Sometimes they're branded as a heat pump tariff, but it's
sorry,
okay,
discounted what? Discounted what? Sorry.
So I was the one that asked the question. I just thought I'd clarify a little bit. I'm with OVO Energy, and if you buy a compliant heat pump, you can get your electricity for 15p per kilowatt hour rather than the 25, 6, 7, whatever it is now. But the way it works is you don't have a separate meter. You actually have to use the electronics in the heat pump to tell the electricity company how much your heat pump is using, so they know how to bill you correctly.
Hence, if it's got to be a compatible model. But yeah, okay.
That's
that's really interesting.
Yeah, at the moment for OVO Energy, it has to be a Valiant. I hope I say it right. I'm also looking at a Samsung heat pump at the moment, and that's not available. That's not available for that unit. But they say more units are coming. So yeah, it's a bit like if you're having an electric car, you get preferential power prices for an electric car, and you also do
I'd
for
heard
a
of
heat
that.
pump.
Yeah, that's great.
Also for a heat pump, I know Octopus have a thing called Cozy Home. I think I called them and they said it's not available in Scotland, but it might be worth checking. And of course, things will change as time goes by as well. Because one of the biggest problems I've actually looked into is one of the reason your power prices haven't changed significantly is that gas is so cheap. Although you have a coefficient of 3 for your heat pump, gas costs a third of the price. So that's why it pretty much comes out at a wash. But if you actually have a look at a map of Europe, most countries don't have the power to electricity ratio that the UK has.
Yes. Yeah, I mean the multiple of 3 is why we thought our bills would probably be about the same, and why we're surprised that they have actually gone down a bit. So yeah,
it's actually like to get a break-even operating cost. 3 is more than enough, because when you got rid of your gas meter, so you got rid of your gas standing charge. So that's a couple £100 a year. Plus the efficiency of a boiler is not 1. It's not 100%. It's more like 80 or 85%. So you're making a much bigger than 3 to 1 jump on efficiency. You move from gas to electric heat pump. So you only need something like 2.8, 2.7, depending on the size of the home and how much heat you need to make a break even.
Yeah, that makes sense. Not including the capital cost of the equipment, of course, because the gas boiler is quite cheap.
Sure, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I found the answer to that earlier question. I've quickly dug out my notes from the original survey, and I thought the original heat demand was 7.3 kilowatts, and we went down to 6.6, I think, with those installations. What that doesn't always show that comfort isn't just about heat loss and heat temperature. So when we insulate like those sloping surfaces, it feels warmer, even if the air temperature isn't any higher. You don't have that cold surface next to your desk. so it feels more comfortable.
Yeah, it's really made a difference. Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Next question from Tom. Was there any measurement or assessment of pre and post air tightness, or was this estimated relative to
No.
calculating heat loss? And what
No.
value was assumed for property type? No. Okay.
No air tightness stuff. This is a Victorian house. It doesn't do airtight.
We didn't do any testing in this building, so we didn't do any blower door testing as part of the heat loss. We would like to, but it's simply unaffordable on a house by house basis. But what we have done is carried out studies in similar buildings in nearby neighborhoods. So we've tested something like a dozen homes now, and we've got a good feel for how these buildings, how airtight they are, and we've done that from the pressurized and depressurized air tightness testing. So we were able to put a realistic air tightness number into the calculation, which is much more realistic than the standard numbers recommended by, in the industry guides. So
Cool.
Great. So I'm just going to scroll down. That might be. Oh, next one, Marion. Was there any insulation to any part of your roof to begin with?
No, there was just the thin layer of loft insulation. The roof itself was just, yeah, joists, sarking and slates.
you had the 150 mil on the horizontal bit, but on the sloping ceilings, there's nothing, right?
Nothing. Yeah, that's right.
The sloping ceilings in the rooms, in the dormers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Great. I think that's all the questions. If anyone else has any more questions, just now is the time to put them in. Otherwise, I think we can finish. Oh, one more question. Are there any plans for the vertical walls?
Not at this time. We'll see how we get on. Yeah, we're aware that's something that could be looked into in the future, and especially the vertical walls below windows, where it's the very thin kind of wood going straight onto the stone. But yeah, that's not something we're thinking about at the moment. Oh, thanks for all the questions, everyone. It's been really lovely to see how engaged you've all been.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kat, for doing this podcast, this webinar, not podcast. It's really, really helpful, I think, for everyone, and just like the practical side of it, and just a really first-hand account of all the different difficulties and what you did. It's really brilliant, and I think lots of people are saying the same thing in the chat.
And just say, if anyone in the chat is a neighbour that is on the Waverley Park WhatsApp group and you want to come around and have a look at our heat pump, just send me a message. You're very welcome to. And anyone else, we're going to be setting up official visits through Loco Home, which Carmen will include information on in the follow-up email that you'll get in a couple of days.
Yes, that's true. Yes, look out for the follow-up email for more ways to get involved and to find out more. And if you have any more questions, any follow-up questions as well, you can always get in touch with either Loco Home or Kat via, I think you said LinkedIn, or the Loco Home forum is a good place as well.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Or the Waverley Park chat. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. I think we'll finish up now. Yeah, lots of positive comments in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.